Hey everybody, welcome back to the library. This is Mr. Murray. Let me take off my mask here. There's no one else in the library. I hope you caught my video last month for Black History Month, which was February, and now we are in March. And so we are shifting over. I wanted to highlight some of the new books that we've added to the collection that I feel like sort of celebrate March, which is Women's History Month. Oh, and you might have noticed I finally got my hair cut. Back to the books. You might remember if you caught my Black History Month highlight of some of the new books, you might remember I mentioned a biography of Ida B. Wells, or Ida Barnett Wells, and also Kamala Harris. And these kind of transition nicely into the Women's History Month. Another book that has a similar bridge would be this one, which is Black Women's History of the United States. I'm going to try to just be brief and just kind of give you a sort of sample of some of the books new books that we have that emphasize women's history and women's issues. So one I wanted you to be aware of is this series, A Cultural History of Women in America, and specifically United States. And these are arranged generally chronologically. So this one is like looking at 1938 up until 1960. And women of today, so 1980 up to the present. And this is a brand new series. So this kind of updates some of the older women's history books that we had in the collection. Other kinds of issues that we have are, of course, we'll look at the achievements of women in different fields of expertise or in cultural fields, politics, and of course, things like a war, women in war. Which women, of course, for many years, men were often seen as the warriors, the ones in combat, but now women have that role too in many countries, including the United States. But women have always been involved, either support, in the munitions factories, holding down the home front, etc. So this looks at some the achievements and contributions of women in that area. In another vein would be women in science. If you happen to watch the landing of Perseverance, the Mars rover just recently, you might have noticed from NASA that was being conveyed to us by one of the engineers on the project who was a woman, which, you know, when I was growing up, it was like, if you watch NASA, like the moon landings, all men were running it. Women had played a very vital role in the space program, as we found out from like the book and movie Hidden Figures, but they were always in the background. So all we always saw was this model of generally white guys, men, is science, but that has changed, fortunately. So women in science and women in arts and entertainment. So those are some of the kinds of things that we have. Of course, I mentioned those biographies that we have of women. Another one being, again, like Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who was a Supreme Court justice, recently died toward the end of the Trump administration. I think I mentioned I mentioned the Women's History of the United States. This one got a lot of good reviews. It's Lifting as We Climb, and it's Black women's battle for the ballot box. Okay, so voting, of course, is still a very contentious issue in the United States. Who should get to vote? How strict should voting restrictions, how tight should voting restrictions be? And of course, in the last election, someone like Stacey Abrams, a Black woman from Georgia, was very key in getting out the vote and actually changing probably the results of the election by all the hard work on the ground of getting voters to come to the polls, particularly voters of color, but also young voters. And so this would be a very interesting book to look at for the historical perspective on that. We also try to get books just on issues, gender equality, dealing with sexism and misogyny. I have a couple books on there on dealing with sexual harassment, sexual assault, how to cope with and how to prevent date rape and sexual assault. All those are issues. Some of those are issues, of course, that apply to all kinds of people, men and women, non-binary folks. But in this case, it is, I think, fits nicely in with the Women's History Month and some of the achievements. Let's see what else. I want to just get a few more. Women in Aviation, which is really often an untold story. We often hear about Lindbergh, the Wright brothers, that kind of thing. We do hear about Amelia Earhart, who's one of the more famous aviators, but also these books will help fill in some of those empty gaps in the history of aviation. Same thing, of course, in sports, but this one is really cool because it's female athletes breaking stereotypes in the roaring 20s, which would fit nicely in if you were doing one of the research projects in some of the history classes that look at the roaring 20s. And let me just wrap up with a few other things. I mentioned some of the things that women I would say women deal with more than men, but all genders, male, female, non-binary, deal with, and that is the issue of like body shaming. And how to deal with that in our society that puts so much emphasis on how our bodies look. And this one I really like just for the real upbeat and colorful way that it's presented. And this is the self-love revolution. It's called Radical Body Positivity for Girls of Color. So there's a lot of really great stuff coming out. I hope you'll visit the library when you can get back in the building. All the new books are highlighted on the shelf that we've added this year. And you can stop up here and I'd be happy to check stuff out for you. And I hope to see you soon and take good care. Bye now.